We are going to show you how we built
this luxurious outdoor kitchen. And if you hang around, we're going to tell you how much it cost.
Roll clip.
So before we build our framework, let's have a look at what we're having in our outdoor kitchen. So we've got an IP rated fridge, our barbecue, no idea sink, and some metal doors.
Before we get started, we're going to actually unload the building materials required for this job. And obviously we're using MG Building Merchants.
Once all of the materials were in, it was time to start unpackaging some of the items we're going to be using for this build. So first things first, the fridge freezer. Oh, muscles, get that thing out of here. And then we'll get the handle chucked onto this just so it's done. No need to leave it lying around and lose it. Next up, we have the barbecue. So we'll get that unwrapped. This actually changes, so hold on tight. Something's going to happen with that barbecue, but we'll cover that in a bit. Next thing's next. Sink, and then some pre-made doors with a little frame. So we've got two of those. We'll set them down and we'll start getting it laid out. Right, so what me and Brad are doing now is we've got our drawing, so we're just laying it out just so we can visualize and make sure we're happy with our drawing, which we are. So now we can start building our framework. The framework is going to be made out of some metal stud work. So basically it's all tin, it's all metal, and it's not combustible. So we just mark the floor so we know the exact layout of our barbecue, and then we can get ready to start trimming it all down and assembling it.
Now it's time to assemble our frame, and what we're using, we're just going to use some simple metal tin snips. You can use a grinder, but we're finding this method nice, easy and simple. So when you're building the frame, you need to make sure that you do one for the floor and one for the top, exactly the same size, and then we're going to infill it with the height of our sides.
So using our tin snips, we cut our U channel. So the U channel is the one you use for the top and bottom. Shabosh, so I've got two there. So basically we're just pre-cutting everything ready to go. And then we move over to our C channel. So this is the one that goes in the upright. So this is the one that goes in the upright position. So even though we was using tin snips, we did decide it was quicker to just batch cut with the angle grinder. We are going with a 900 worktop, so the top will be at 900. So we just cut a load at 900, and then all they do is they just slot in between that U channel. So I've just been putting them in, give them a little twist, bosh, and then we can screw it together with self-drilling screws. So we're just setting these in, twisting them and screwing them in. They're all at 400 millimeters, so that's me checking now. Same like any sort of stud wall you ever gonna build. Once we had got the back of the main wall built, it was time to screw it down to the decking. So we just measured up off the back of the deck, because that's what we wanted it to be in line with, and then we just screwed straight down into the frame underneath. Once our first wall was built, it was time to move on to the second. So the design we was going for was an L shape, so this will be the return side. We attach the two walls together, and then we just double check that we're nice and square with the front of the deck, and then send a couple of screws down into that frame. Right, that's the back of our barbecue or kitchen area framed out, so the main wall's framed. Now what we're going to start doing is framing the little walls that go in between. That's why we've got our little fridge in place, because we want to get nice and tight with our framework, and then we'll move that back out of the way. So the little walls are basically setting the depth of our barbecue area. So ours is a total of 700 with the worktop. So we shrunk everything down to 600 underneath, because we wanted a nice little overhang for everything. So we calculated that, and then we built a series of sections to install, which is basically going to separate the different parts of the barbecue. So what you've just seen us do there is attach a couple of cement fibre boards onto the frame. The reason we've done that now is because it helps us rack the walls. So the walls will twist side to side until we've put some sort of ball to them, and then it sturdies everything up. So we've only done a couple in the corners just to hold it in position, and then we move back to install our little sections of wall. Once we'd built our little tiny walls, it was time to put a front on it. That slots onto the front, and then we just attach it using those same screws in super fast speed.
As you can see, people, it's coming up. As you can see, it's really starting to take shape, and Phil's actually starting to build the walls to take the integrated barbecue. What are you using that for, Phil?
I don't know. Because you've turned the camera on.
Oh, yeah, and we're using one of these levels.
It's really, really nice.
I hope you're enjoying the video, guys. Remember, like, subscribe.
Right, now we need to build our wall. A wall in the wall. So we can either build a little wall here, a little piece of wall here, and then a little wall that sits in between them walls, and then one that goes there. Or we can build a wall that drops.
Whatever's easiest.
I don't know. First things first, we need
some track.
One piece at 103.5.
Yeah. This is my time to shine. What's that, Phil? You want a bit of metal?
Oh, metal man.
What size is it again?
Oh, do you mean metal man? 103.5.
103.5.
Thanks.
Anything else, sir?
Yeah, we need 3 more of them. You might have noticed that this frame is about this much bigger than it was a little while ago, and that is for good reason. The barbecue we ordered was actually a little bit damaged, so to save time we've had to go with a different model, so we've just widened this a bit. Nothing changes, we carry on, we adapt, we overcome.
And I want to step in and
I want to step out.
I just want to step in to say that we're about to cover the doors, because we thought it's a very important process to building an outdoor kitchen barbecue area.
So with these doors, they're actually like a prefabricated housing and door, so all we need to do is get ourselves some uprights, which are these. So because we're using the metal stud work, the reason we use that as well is because it's not gonna catch on fire if anything overheats, so it's just a bit safer. So this just slides in like so, and then we're fixing in with these self-drilling or self-tapping screws, making sure it's level obviously, because nobody wants a wonky door. Once we've got our first upright, we can then get our next one in, and the gap, so this gap that we need, that is in the instructions. So we didn't want to measure this because there's like screws and stuff sticking out. You actually need the measurement that is set in the instructions for whatever doors you want to use. So that's the distance we want for our one. So our 2 uprights are in, so that's the sides of the opening that we need. So now obviously we need a top and a bottom. So the way we do that is we get some more C channel, that's what this is called, and then we put those against the uprights that we've got at the height we need, and then we fix these to those. And then using the U channel, which is the slightly different one, so the base track, we're going to sit that on top like that, and then we screw that to the C channel we just put in. And then it's the same process for the top, so obviously we need to shrink this down because our door isn't quite as tall as that. And then once we've tiled this, which is coming up very soon, this can go inside, and because we've allowed a lot on this, we've got a lot of adjustment to move it up, down, left, right when we're ready. And we can also get our gas bottle out.
We are going to be installing another door in our kitchen area. We're going to get on with framing it, and I'll see you in a bit. Barbecue number 2 has just arrived, and me and Phil was framing all last night, and we did the sizes just off the website, so we hope that this fits in our frame.
This is not ideal, but you know.
Let's just get over it. Hours and hours of work, Phil. Oh my God, Phil. Oh, it's got a clear front.
It's got a clear.
Oh, look.
You can see where you're cooking. So once me and Brad have got over the absolute excitement of the new barbecue arriving, it was time to carry on cladding or installing the cement fiberboards to the rest of the barbecue. So we're going to be wrapping the whole thing in the fiberboard. The reason we're doing that again is to fireproof the whole unit, because we don't want any fires, because barbecues get super hot. While we're installing the fiberboard, we are checking for level, because this stuff will rack it. So as you need to adjust it, once you screw it in, that's it, it's set. And another thing, I completely forgot to put my mask on while installing this. Do not forget to put your mask on, this stuff's not very good for you. Here you can see we've cut out around our door openings that we created earlier. To cut these balls we are using a diamond blade, so the same sort of blade that you'll be cutting tiles with. So now you know. So Phil's just marked all these out and I cut them, so we don't know who to blame yet, but we're going to check if they fit. Look at this cut.
That's a really nice cut.
That's some of the best cut.
Oh, there's a bumblebee tuna. Everybody get down. Yeah, that's sweet. That's what I was worried about. One of the last cuts we're going to do is the sink. So what I've done, I've just marked out central of this little piece here. And I've just marked out the gap that we need. So we're going to cut that and then we can start test fitting some items. What I'm doing here is I'm cutting out a little circle in our backer board. The reason being is we've got a crazy little feature that you're going to see very soon.
So that's all the cement boards on there. It was a very dusty job, wasn't it, Phil?
Very, 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 very dusty.
But now it's time to install some porcelain tiles to the outside. But first, we have to primer it.
So this is just a typical tile primer. The reason we prime is because we want to make sure we get good adhesion when we put our porcelain tiles and our worktop on top of the backer boards.
Right, Mike's done a fantastic job of priming. Now it's time to install our tiles, but we're using porcelain.
The reason we are using 20mm porcelain, which is way over the top, is because these will eventually be going here and we want it all to tie in together.
Right, we're going to leave a 15mm gap all around the bottom and that's going to give it a nice shadow detail. We're getting this all prepared before we mix up the adhesive because we've got rapid set. And when we use rapid set, it goes off really quick.
Yeah, it goes off rapid.
So once we got our layout sorted, it was time to start cutting. So using a level, if you run your blade along that, it gives you a perfectly straight cut. And then we can plunge in full depth once we've got our line to follow. So this was actually part of a mitre. So once we got our straight cut done, we then cut a 45-degree cut into that corner because we're going to be using a resin. So once we got our cut, we then use some polishing wheels. That basically just cleans up any minute little chips. And then we just work our way up the grits. It just gives a nice finish on that sharp edge that we've got there. And a little hand sand just to finish it off.
Right, now it's time to chuck some tiles on. We're actually going to be using flexible tile adhesive because outside there's going to be a lot of expansion and contractions. When you're mixing your adhesive, you just want to make sure that it's not too wet because the tiles will slide around, and if it's too dry you won't be able to apply it.
So when we're applying our adhesive, because this is rapid set, we've basically marked out where each tile will go, and then I'm just putting adhesive up to those lines. That way we're not going to get caught short when it starts to set off. So we're just taking our time, not going mad. We're not trying to put it all on at once, just a little bit at a time up to our lines. And then we start at the miters, well I do, just because they're the hardest things to line up. So we're doing the two corners, getting them lined up, and then we'll move on to the bigger bits. And like I said, so we move on to the other mitre. So this way, we haven't got to worry about any other tiles getting in our way. We can move these back and forth and get that mitre nice and crispy. Once we was happy with our mitre, double check that our levels are all good. And then it's time to move on to the full pieces. So because we've set our top at 900 and these tiles are 6x900, we're actually just putting them in whole, no cutting. See, we're always thinking ahead. So what we're putting in here is leveling clips. So they just give you a little bit of help when you're trying to level off your tiles or your porcelain. So you slide them down the back, and then when you put your next tile in against it, you spin on the caps and it pulls the two tops perfectly flat. So it just gives you a little bit of adjustment. Make sure you get a perfectly flat bit of tiling. So once that back wall was done, rather than carrying on there, I moved to the other mitre. So same reason, we can now get the mitre lined up without panicking. So once all the tiling was complete and the adhesive had dried, it was time to start installing our doors. So these are brushed stainless steel doors and they come with a frame. So you haven't got to hang them, you've just got to stick them into position or screw them if you want. So we'll install the handles because they don't come installed. Why would they? Nothing does these days. So that's just a simple case of spacer, screw, slide it in and tighten it all up. And then once they're tight, the way we installed these is to put a bead of CT1 clear around the edge, and then we put some packers on the floor and we just sat the door on that, and then we just stuck it in position. So once this goes off, these doors are not coming out ever again. Once it's stuck, it's a case of checking that it's level. If it's not, you better adjust it, because once that goes off, you're done. And then it's the same thing on the other door. So once the doors were in, it's time to move on to the sink. The sink is not going to be going into the countertop, it's actually going to be sitting underneath. So we CT1 the cement fiberboard and we stick our sink down to that, making sure it's square with the front of our barbecue area.
Right, that's it. That is all the appliances in. Our next job is to install some LED lights, and them lights are from Allco Lighting.
So with the Allco lights, they have their own track. So you cut the track down to size and install it. So we used an angle grinder here. That was the easiest way to cut them down, and then we just CT1'd them to the top of the tiles. So the trim has been designed to hook over the top of the tiles. You haven't got to do any sort of fixings or adjustment. It just hooks over and glues in, so it's like an L shape. And once it's stuck into position, don't forget to do that lovely little smudge across the top. Otherwise, if you don't, nothing will happen. You just won't get silicone all over your finger. And that is all the tracks installed.
Oh my God.
So once me and Brad had complained about how heavy this worktop was, it was time to start measuring and cut it. So this is a compact laminate worktop, so it's suitable for outside. So we just measure the width, remembering that we want an overhang on all sides. Mark our top, and then we're going to be cutting it with timber blades. So you can cut this with normal wood blades, it just seems to wear them out very quick, so just remember that. So we cut the long length down, and then what I'm doing here is I'm adding a little detail that was already on, so it's got like a chamfered edge. So using the DeWalt router, we just put that back with our trend router bits, and then it was time to start marking out for our sink opening. So we've taken our time here. Our measurements need to be absolutely 100% for this, because otherwise it will look terrible. So we just check, and then double check. So before we cut the sink out, we also need to mark out for that special little feature, that little circle hole we made. So we're gonna match that circle and cut that out. So we do that first, just because once we cut our sink out, it's gonna lose a little bit of strength, so we didn't really want to be moving it around too much. So we cut our circle out, and then it was time to cut our sink out. So with the sink, we just use our track saws as close to the edges as we can get, and then finish it up with the old jigsaw. Just like all the other edges, we decided that that little chamfer detail would look very nice above the sink. So we grabbed our DeWalt router and our trend bit, and we added that detail back in. Now, this is a different feature. So the draining board, rather than having one sat on top, we actually routed lines into the worktop itself. So with compact laminate, you can actually cut into the top and it won't lose its colour. So we put 5 little lines in, give them a little sand, and now we've got a draining board.
So that's it, we've test fitted our first piece. Phil's done a fantastic job of routing in these nice drain lines and a nice finish wherever we've cut the actual top. This top is a compact laminate top, so it's heat resistant and it can be left outside all year round.
Oh, thanks Brad, I know I did a good job. Anyway, now it's on to the second piece of worktop. So this is the bit where the barbecue will be going. So our first job is to cut it down to length, again using our track saw. Once our worktop was cut down to length, it was time to mark out for our biscuits. So To join these we use biscuits. So this is a DeWalt biscuit cutter, so we just plunge that in on our 3 marks that we made. We do that on both sides. So here's us doing the longer piece. Again, this is designed for timber, but it does work with a compact laminate. Once we had cut in our biscuits, it was time to make the hole for our tap. So we did that, and then we removed all the tops and got ready to glue them down. So we're using white CT1. The colour doesn't really matter, but we just thought as the top's white, this is a safer option for us. So we're dotting it around just to make sure that we clear over any little humps and bumps, including our sink and our LED tracks. So this just gives us a little bit more play when we're pushing that top down into position. So the first one was the big one. Set it down into position and then do any minute adjustments, so making sure that we've got an equal gap front, back and sides. And then before we put our smaller section on, we're taping along our joint. Because we're going to be using resin, we don't want to get it anywhere, so we're doing a nice little tape line across both sides, and then we'll add our CT1 and then we mix up our resin for the joint. So this is white resin, so that's what we glue our biscuits in with, all 3 of those, and then we add resin to the whole side. And what that does is that's going to bond the 2 worktops together forever. So speed is key here because the resin does set very quickly. So we get this into position and then we just push it in, and we want that resin to squeeze out between the 2. And then just using something flat, I had a packer, we just filled the top with spare resin and then just scraped it flat like so. And then before that fully cures, we want to get that tape off because we want a nice clean finish. And then Brad did one bit of work here. Well done, Brad. Once Brad had done his 3 seconds of work, it was time to move on to installing a tap. So because we've installed the tiniest doors ever, I've had to squeeze my way in to install it. And then once that was in, it was onto some heat-proof tape. So what this is going to do is going to give a barrier between the barbecue and the worktop. Even though it's heat resistant, we need to do what we can to keep that heat isolated. You may be wondering what this is. So this is a wine cooler. So you plug it in and it keeps your wine nice and cold. So I want to give a massive thank you to Kalo for supplying this. And we're going to get it installed and show you what it looks like. So the cat's out the bag. That little hole was for a wine cooler. This thing is amazing. So you cut the hole, it slots down and locks on, and then all we have to do is silicone around the edge and install the bezel. So we went for a curved bezel, so it just sits slightly proud. You can do a recessed version, but this is the one we picked. So what I'm doing now is I'm sliding in this LED track. I think these are called the Flex Extreme, and they're from Allco. So they've been kind enough to supply these with their track, so this all suits, and it is a super easy system. And in a little bit when we light it up, you'll see why it's so good. Before we show you the finished article, let's get some finishing touches. Who doesn't like a little green leaf wall? So we just screwed that to the fence behind, just added a bit of character before we can reveal the final results. And look at that, the wine cooler in the background all lit up, and the undergo looks amazing.
Right, that's it. It's looking absolutely amazing. We've had great fun doing this project.
And if you've got any questions or maybe even some ideas for future videos, chuck them in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you later.
Love you, bye.